Hello and welcome to this lecture on academic writing. Let me get the first slide up here. So, we're going to talk about academic writing. We're going to talk about how to refer, and then we'll do some exercises in class, and I will also upload some things to do before class, but I'll get to that later. So first of all, I want you to think a little bit about where you come from, how different cultures and different context is how that differs in different academic settings. So this is different. It's different to different universities, different countries, and you are a very heterogeneous group in that you come from many different countries. So I want you to think about that. Before I give some advices on how to write for academia, what is the academic genre, and then go on to how and when to refer. So I guess I have to press this FaceTime picture so I don't disappear, since I know you want to see me for some reason. Anyway, so first of all, I would like you to think about where you come from and how it is to write for academia where you come from. So in 2 sentences, you don't have to submit this anywhere, just bring this to class the 18th. I would like to talk to you how you would describe the academic style where you come from. So please think about that, and we'll discuss that and perhaps also relate to the Swedish system, which is different. Okay, but with that said, let's go to the lecture here on and starting with the academic genre. Now I put this cartoon here from Calvin and Hobbes because I think it illustrates very much what the conception people have of academia, and also what I often encounter when I meet students, the idea that it has to be difficult, that academia has to be difficult. As Calvin says here, I used to hate to write assignments, but now I enjoy them. I realize that the purpose of writing is to inflate weak ideas, obscure poor reasoning, and inhibit clarity. With a little practice, writing can be an intimidating and impenetrable fog. Want to see my book report? And Hobbes answers the dynamics of interbeing and monological imperatives in Dick and Jane, a study of psychic transrelational gender modes. Academia, here I come. Now, this illustrates that the idea that many things that academia is supposed to be difficult because they use difficult language in papers and presentation, but that's wrong. Indeed, academia is difficult, but it's difficult because we use very precise concepts, and we always define what we use and the concept we use. So this precision shall not be confused with being difficult. I don't want to see sentences that are long just because you think this is how you write in academia. You should be as clear and precise as possible, different from being difficult. Very important to remember when you write your thesis. So to give you an example here, we take the example of democracy, a concept that I've been using a lot. Now, democracy is a very imprecise concept. What does it mean? I mean, taking from Greek, Melisanti can help me here perhaps. It means the rule of the people. Demos is people and kratein is rule. Huh? But what does this mean, the rule of the people? It can how do people rule? I mean, are we talking about direct democracy here or representative democracy? This is a huge difference. And are we talking, what do we want to discuss about democracy here? Is it the how, the ruling things, the more governance aspects of democracy, or how to involve, how to engage people on participation? Then we perhaps have to make a difference between elitist democracy and participatory democracy, the idea that we should be ruled by the elite who knows better and we just elect the elites, or we should be able to participate even between the elections. So then we have the difference between elitist democracy and participatory democracy. Or perhaps it's not this we want to discuss in our thesis. It's what is the so-called rationale or the reason for democracy, why it is important. And perhaps then we have different ideas of democracy out of this sense, in the sense that is it important with democracy for people to agree with each other, or is it important with democracy so people can see different views and where people disagree? And then you would take, I mean, if you want agreement and consensus that this is the purpose of democracy, that people should agree on things, then you take a deliberative stance on democracy. Whereas if you think that democracy is important because to highlight differences and conflicts in society, well, then you take a radical stance of democracy. So in a thesis, you cannot just say that I'm interested in democracy. It's very imprecise. You have to be more precise than that. But this is not the same thing as being difficult. So I hope I made that clear. So let's go to the next slide. So writing your thesis is about being as precise and concrete as possible, not being confused for being difficult. And the purpose here is to transfer your ideas as precisely as possible without any risk of alternative or misunderstandings. So you should consider every word you use. I mean, if you use democracy, for example, it can be understood very differently, as I just showed in the different slide. So therefore you have to be more precise, because otherwise you're not transferring your ideas, what you mean, as precisely as possible. And a good way of doing this as being precise is to use references to see, like, I'm gonna use democracy as Habermas has discussed it, and then refer to Habermas. But we'll get to reference later in the lecture. Another example is, of course, using very precise concepts that you define, very important, but also using example is very important in order to transfer your ideas as precisely as possible. So writing for academia, it's also an art in that you have to walk the thin line between saying what you want to say as quickly as possible. I mean, this is also important. No one wants to read for the sake of reading. Don't tire the reader and your supervisor just because you want to tire him or her. So you want to say what you want to say as quickly as possible. Don't kill your darlings, don't overdo it. Don't write more than you have to. But that being said, you should never lose the precision. And you should also acknowledge and build upon what has already been done in the field. So it's a particular genre, you have to build on the field, you should be as precise as possible. At the same time, don't tire the reader. Don't put a lot of bullshit in there because of the sake of filling the thesis with pages. You should be as precise as possible and quick as possible without losing the precision. Now, this is an art. It's not easy, but you will learn. And another way of saying this is that in Swedish we have the saying that you should not write people on the nose, skriva folk på näsan, saying that for example, you should not, I'm thinking of a good example. I put the picture here that this is a doorbell. I mean, it's quite obvious, it's about, then you write people on the nose. Oranges is a fruit. Orange is a fruit. Yes, everyone knows that. So you don't want to state the obvious. You don't want to write people on the nose, because then people will get annoyed and feel that you're just tiring them and taking their valuable time. At the same time, you should not make the reader feel stupid, not explaining what you mean, not transferring the idea so the reader is on your side and with you on what you are saying. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be on your side, but it should be with you, understanding what you mean, so then they can criticize or agree with you accordingly. So this is also about this thin line walking here. No, you should not make the reader feel stupid, but you should not tire the reader with stating obvious stuff. So think about this. And I'm not saying it is easy. I'm still struggling with this. And different audience, who's your audience? Where are you submitting this? I mean, you're going to write a master thesis, so you know a bit about the audience. Think about that when you write. And also, what's the function of the text here? That you should get an academic title and a good grade. You're partly writing for the examiner here. You should not forget about this. Okay. This being said, it's also very important to acknowledge that academic texts are neither anecdotal nor journalistic pieces. So academia is not about telling stories, telling the story of when you went to a demonstration and how you felt about this. It's not about journalism in that you report an event or report on a phenomenon. Academia is about theories in that sense, that you are part of a tradition that you A, build upon, and that you B, contribute to. And therefore theories are very important. You need to relate to what has been done, said, and concluded before in this area. You need to do literature searches and literature reviews. We will have a workshop together with the library with the 12th of December on this, where we will depart from your topics to do a literature research in the fields that are important for you. So this is very important that you're part of here, because this is part of the academic genre. To relate back to what has been done before and what has been said before, and to also position you here in this field. And don't be, as the saying says, by standing on the shoulders of the giant, you can see much further than him. This is what we do in academia. We do research that gives rise to different questions that some others can look into and be inspired by. So we are using what other people have done and what kind of question that their research has given rise to and build upon that. And therefore also references are so important, as we will return to later. Now, very important for when you write your thesis is always be absolutely 100% clear about what you are doing, what you are researching. I mean, at one point, in the beginning, you can be a little bit, you're looking around what has been done in the field, where can I come in, to kind of fine-grain your research questions. But then when you have your research question, you should not look to the side. You should be so focused on what you're doing. You should not be sidetracked. Focus, focus, focus. So this, you should print this slide, put it on your computer, and never forget this when you write. Always be reminded about this. Why is this important? Always justify and motivate what you're doing for the reader. Tell the reader, and for yourself perhaps, why this is interesting and why this is important. You always have to justify the topic you are choosing, the methods you are using to study this topic, the theories, etc. So this is another slide I want you to print and put on your computer when you write your thesis. Always justify what you are doing. Why is this important? And then finally, yes, summary of this, always justify and motivate. Very important. Always keep that in mind. So with this being said, talked a little bit about the academic genre. And it's not journalism, it's not telling stories, it's not about being difficult, it's about being precise and exact in your concept you choose. Let's start to look a little bit about the structure of the text, and this also taps into the proposal that you're going to write now this fall. So if we start with the introduction, which is often what a thesis starts with, the introduction, you need to tell the reader from the beginning what you're studying, and you also have to sell the thesis to the reader and to the examiner, and my advisor told me that you have approximately 1 page when I did my PhD thesis. This means you have approximately half a page to get the reader on your side. If you don't have the reader on your side, the first half page or the first page, so the reader knows exactly why this is important, why he should spend a day or two of her valuable life to read this, you have lost. You have lost the reader. You have lost the examiner. So this, you have to sell the thesis from the beginning. Tell the reader, why is this relevant? Why should the reader spare their time? This has to be clear from the beginning. I mean, this is happening right now. Instagram is getting very, very used right now. Snapchat is growing very much right now, and this is really interesting because this poses, for example, you could argue that this poses interesting ideas of our communication in a democracy. And you also have the absolute right data to study this, because you have been collecting the first 100,000 Snapchat pictures or something. So this is, this is happening right now, and this is interesting because of this, and you have the right data for studying it. This, if you have this, can argue for this in the first half page of your thesis, this is a good way to get the reader on your side, if you can convince him and her that this is really interesting, it's timely, it's happening now, and you also have very good data to study this. So this is about the introduction, and you also have to talk a little bit about the aim, and it taps into this, why this is important to study when you sell your thesis. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? What are your goals? And the aim is not the same as the research questions. I mean, you have to separate the two. This is a very common error in theses, that you use the same here. No. So the aim here, what do you want to accomplish? What are your goals? And I give you an example here in gray. For example, I want to contribute to a better understanding of the role of Twitter in a representative democracy. Okay, this is an aim. This is the larger goal you want to accomplish, and which you then in the introduction have argued this is really relevant. Why this is super relevant for something. It's super relevant because all of this, since last election, all the parliamentarians are all on Twitter. So we really need to study how parliamentarians use Twitter in a representative democracy, because this has not happened before. What does it do? Does it do anything? You have to motivate this. And then you fine-grain this in the research questions. So how do you want to discuss this, the role of Twitter in representative democracy? Well, maybe here you want to focus here on first-time voters in Sweden. Sorry for this, using Twitter. This should be Twitter here. How first-time voters in Sweden use Twitter for political information during an elections. Now, remember, always justify and motivate your choices. Now you have to motivate this. Well, first-time voters, very important for a representative democracy to focus on first-time voters. It will also, since they will vote for many subsequent years, they are very important to see how the future of the representative democracy will develop. So even though this is not the total of sample of voters in Sweden, they are very interesting because blah, 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 blah. You justify this. And why an election? Well, arguably in a representative democracy that you are going to discuss, election is perhaps the defining moment in a representative democracy when you elect the representatives. So you can argue for this. So the research question is where you really find these questions that are really you want to address to discuss the larger aim. And then comes the overview of the field. This is what makes this different from many other genres here. What has been done in academia concerning this? There's a lot of things done on social media and politics. You have to review this field and position yourself here. Where in this field do you contribute with your thesis? And this is why the literature review is so important. And this is why we're going to have a workshop together with the library on how to find relevant literature for you. You have to do this overview of the field. And what is your position in the field? Where do you place your research, this thesis in the field? Who do you want to talk to? What theories do you want to discuss? Who would you like to argue against? Etc. etc. So don't forget your voice. Your voice, who's independent and critical, is very important in the thesis. And also here, positioning in the field, you always have to justify why this position and motivate it. Why this theoretician? Why not someone else? Always motivate. Or remember this slide that you should print and have in front of you when you write your thesis. So you position yourself in this field. Now, there comes another part, which is also theoretical but different from the more overview theories, is the analytical theories, the theories that you will use in your analysis. So there are two different functions of theories. One, you position yourself in the field. You go do the overview. What has other people done in this concerning social media and democracy, for example? What do you contribute to, etc., etc. And then you have the theories that you will use to understand and to analyze your research question. So I put the example here. You may place yourself in a traditional social media use in elections and argue that there is a lack of studies focusing on first-time voters and Facebook or Twitter as a platform, whatever you can use. So this is, this is the positioning in the field. But then perhaps in order to analyze how first-time voters uses Facebook or Twitter, you might want to use uses and gratification theories, that you understand voter behavior out of this, that they use social media to gratify certain needs. So then that is your analytical theory, and which you then develop in a theoretical framework, a framework that you then have to operationalize in your method. For example, if you want to use uses and gratification theory, what are the gratifications? How are you going to operationalize them? How are you going to study this, etc., etc. So you can then argue that the analytical theories or the theoretical framework, whatever you want to phrase it and label it, that will provide you an entry point into studying the material. And you can of course you don't have to use uses and gratification theory. This is just an example. Perhaps you want to use social psychology. Perhaps you argue. This is also, you have to argue and motivate always. So this is why you argue for this. Perhaps I would argue for more socio-psychological theories of identity, perhaps, or networked individualism, in order to understand this. So you always make choices here when you write a thesis, or when you choose the theories to use as your analytical tools, and you have to motivate that always. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And then the next section is about methods, sample and operationalization. I've been highlighting this here, putting it in bold, because this is, you forget, well, not you will not forget it, but students before you have forgot this, how you operationalize your research question and your analytical framework. So you have to argue for what methods are best to answer your research question. For example, if you're interested in how voters use social media, should you do observation and interviews? Well, I think that interviews is perhaps not a good method to study how, because interviews, they will give you their ideal image. If you ask someone, how do you use social media? I mean, when I asked Nina, the politician, how do you use social media? I use it to interact with the voters. That was her idea of how she used it, but it was not how she used it. She used it to hang out with other party comrades, but this was not what she said in the interviews. So if you want to study how, then you have to do observation. So you also here have to always argue for your methods as well. And how do you then operationalize these analytical theories and the research questions? How are you going to find these gratifications if this that you're going to use or these psychosocial mechanisms? You have to. This is what you have to put in the methods chapter as well as reliability and validity discussions. Reliability, I often just summarize it like this. You should, in the method section, provide enough information so the interested reader could replicate the study. There should be as much information that he or she could actually go and go and do exactly the same. So you have to, how did you do the interviews? How did you do the observation? What did you look for? How many did you? Etc., etc. So you have to be very detailed of your study in order for it to be reliable, to meet criteria of reliability. But you also have to study what you say you are studying, which is called validity. I mean, I give you an example. You could say that, for example, that you could correlate the import of grapefruits and the level of people having cancer in the country. Now, then you could argue that grapefruit causes cancer because you see the more a country import grapefruits, the more people get sick in cancer. So this you could very well argue out of this data that you collect. Now the problem is that what you're measuring here, there is something missing here, because what grapefruits or mangoes or these fruits are import fruits are an sign of is the general welfare of the society, and cancer is a welfare sickness. So if you argue that grapefruit causes cancer, I would say that you have a validity problem here, because you're not studying what you say you're studying, grapefruit, because you're studying welfare. Okay, and perhaps a more common example that we often encounter in theses and student essays is, for example, students say that I want to talk about how young people use social media, or how voters in Sweden, if you take the other example, the voters in Sweden use social media, and then you only interview your friends, other media students. Now, media students, if we talk about social media use, and I know many of you will talk about social media in your theses, you cannot get a representative samples of Swedish people in general by talking to media students, especially not talking about social media. They are more media savvy than other people in society. So this is also a case where you would have a validity problem, because you say that you study voters in general, but you are really not studying voters in general. You're studying a very particular segment of the voter group who happens to be media students. So then you would have a validity problem. So it may sound very trivial that you should always study what you say you're studying, but many students and also in other academics for that matter have problem when it comes to validity, because of the example I just gave you. And also this is the place where you need to address ethical issues, especially if you're going to research internet. There are ethical issues to be addressed. Concerning anonymity and whether you have access, disguised yourself, you're not allowed to do that, etc. And then comes the results and analysis part. So now you have gone out and done this search. Now you will want to analyze the results. And this is where your theories, the theoretical framework, not the background theories, not the positioning in the field, this is not what you're going to do, return to here, but the theories in the theoretical framework. And here it's important that we get payoff for all the theories you've been discussing in the theoretical framework. Very often students give, the textbook approach, all the theories there is. Fill out the thesis like this. This is a very good way to tire the reader, by the way. But, I think of planting and payoff in the film movie kind of connotation here. If you see an action movie and in the beginning they zoom in on the red basket, then you know this red basket is going to be very important for the plot of the movie. The same thing here in your thesis. The theories you zoom in your analytical framework. We need a payoff later in the analysis here. So all the theories you bring up there, you should return to in the analysis. And analysis is another way of, is another word that is very difficult for students in general. What is analysis and how do you do an analysis? Now, I usually use the metaphor of making out, and because most of you, all of you should know how to make out at least. So when you make out, you're two persons and you hold each other, stick in the tongue in the other's mouth, etc. Now imagine that these two persons, one of the persons is your empirical material, your data you've collected, and the other person is the theoretical framework. You have to make these two persons making out. You have to make them hold each other, stick in their tongues in their mouth, talk to each other. You have to make the empirical material talk to the theoretical framework. And the result of this snuggling, the baby that you're the midwife here, you are delivering by matchmaking. You have done a match made here between your empirical material and the theories that you've been arguing for. That is your results. This is the baby coming out of this marriage, this match made that you have been arguing for in the thesis. So the analysis is about making the empirical material talk to the theoretical framework that you have been arguing for previously in your thesis. So I hope you get this metaphor of making out, snuggling, yeah? And then conclusion. Conclusion is actually, you have been so focused. Now in the conclusion, you can take out this and broaden the horizons again a little bit. Here you summarize the results. You return to the research questions and you answer them one by one. You also return to the aim and discuss your findings in relation to your aim, in light of your aim. And you're also allowed here to speculate a little bit about the implications of your study. And you also suggest future research questions, because this is the beautiful thing with academia and the academic genre. You do not only get answers to questions, you also find many new questions that are interesting to answer, and perhaps there are master students coming after you who's looking for interesting studies to do. So you also suggest future research here in the analysis. Okay, a little bit of my own advices here, how to create this so-called red thread or inner coherence to get the reader to follow you through the thesis. You should take the reader in the hand and not let go during the whole process. You should always remind the reader. You could remind the reader about the research questions a couple of times. Ask my research questions that I discussed on page blah blah blah. I'm interested in this. Refer back to the what you've been saying before. Remind the reader without not reminding too much. You don't want to write them on the nose. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's finding the right balance here. You can also have these parts where you say, like, in this chapter I'm going to discuss this, and this is important for the methods that will come later. And then you tell the reader, is like, now it's going to come a whole chunk of theories and it might not seem relevant right now, but it will be when I discuss the methods. So you tell the reader what's going to happen and why it's important. Now I also say that when you write a text, you can think about a line of elephants walking, holding each other in the tail from the trunk, and you could say that each paragraph in your text is like an elephant. But what is important in these paragraphs is the tail sentences and the trunk sentences. The trunk and the tail sentences. So when you go on to the next paragraph, in light of this above, therefore, this points towards, given this, blah, blah, blah. You don't forget these tail and trunk sentences, as I call them, that ties the text together and the reader can follow how you argue in your text. Now, what I do, and you don't have to read this, it's just going to give you an example of how I do when I work. So this is a chapter that I've been, well, an article that I wrote. And what I do here is that, as you see, there are sections in red which is not part of the text. So when I write, I always try to put a little summary under each paragraph here, or each chunk of text, to really see what is this about. And this also makes it easier for you to move around the text to see where should I discuss this, where should I discuss that, because then you have the little summary here. And here, this could be like this paragraph here is one elephant, and then you have to have these tail and trunk sentences. I mean, the question then becomes, referring back and referring forward. Therefore, I will discuss this in the next section. So this is one way I write the little summaries, and these summaries should not be longer than one sentence. If you have to write the summary of this paragraph in 2 sentences, you have too much stuff in this paragraph. One sentence or just one word. This section here is about authority, which I define as a knowledge power dimension, referring to Foucault as a power and reflexivity is this section. So it should be very easy to summarize what this is about. If it's not, then perhaps you have to split them. And perhaps there are sentences that should go here. And but then when you have this, you can clearly see that, okay, maybe I can start with this, and or here, if you have which often happens to me, you have 2 paragraphs with the same, I summarized in the same way, then I realized, okay, this needs to be put together in this place, and this I can perhaps delete in order for not tire the reader. This is an example. I mean, we all are all different and work differently, so this is just an example how I work. It might work for you, might not. Okay, another tip here is to read your text loud or mumble it. I know that I've been giving this advice to some of you before. It's also a very good way to actually see how your text works, because where you will stumble on words, not get the rhythm of the text, where you will like have to stop and read again what this is said, this is where the reader also will do this. So this is a very good way. Read it loud, not in your head, or mumble it. I mumbled my whole PhD thesis, and it was very good for the readability of the text. Let other people read your text. You are required to have your text proofread, and you should let other people read your text. I would never ever publish anything that I haven't had proofread or have had other people commented on. And then there is many advices when and how to write an introduction in order to create this red thread and this inner coherence, as we had here. And often the advice here is that you should write the introduction when you actually know what you're doing and why this was so interesting and important, is the last thing you write in a thesis. And this works for many people. For me, it doesn't work. I have to have the introduction so I know exactly what I'm doing. So it's different people, but yeah, perhaps you're one of those who could write the introduction last, or the one who has to know exactly from the beginning what they're doing or not. Okay, so this leads us into this last section of the lecture, referencing. We expect that you know how to refer, but we know that you don't. Well, at least the previous students have not been very good at this. Now, as we've been saying, research is not done in a vacuum. We build upon others. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We build upon Habermas, Castells, Foucault, all these people. And therefore, we refer to them. We acknowledge them. So we refer because of academic honesty, to relate, build upon, and perhaps critique. I mean, we like you to critique researchers. So therefore, we have to refer to these researchers. And it has to be absolutely crystal, 100% clear in the text what is A, your findings, B, other people's findings, and C, common assumptions. So I'll give you an example of this. Here you have a couple of sentences, and you can think about that. Where would you need a reference here, and why, according to this sentence? Now take a while, stop the presentation here, and think about this for a while. Okay. And here in the next slide, then, you have the answers. It's commonly understood that democracy and prosperity is related. Okay, it's commonly understood. You're referring to common assumption. Okay, we understand that. It's clear. Many researchers have tried to disentangle this relation. Okay, which research is that? Here you have to put reference. Who are you talking about here? Many researchers. Give us the reference. In this field of research, I have argued that how we see prosperity is of pivotal importance. Okay, where did you say this? In which article you did this? I mean, perhaps people are interested to read this, so you have to refer for that reason also to give people advices on where to find more on the topic. Some have argued that prosperity foremost is related to economic in-use. Who is this some? Who is this some? Tell us. You have to refer here. However, in later years, this economic focus has been questioned. By whom? Who has questioned this? You have to put a reference. Especially access to education have been highlighted as a key factor to prosperity. Where was this highlighted? In which reports? This you have to refer to as well. Therefore, in this research, my aim is to study countries with more and better in terms of higher level educated, even better educated inhabitants in these countries are more prosperous. Okay, here, therefore, I am here talking about what you're going to do. Okay, it's clear, it's you, no one else. Then you don't have to refer. There are many different styles of references, and according to I often say that you can do whatever you want as long as you're coherent, but according to the guidelines for Uppsala University, you should design references and quotation according to the guidelines specified by the Chicago Manual Style. Basically, you have to put it in references, author, and date. Yeah, so this is the reference style you have to adhere to. So no footnotes, in-text referencing. And then, of course, this goes without saying, you also have to list all the references at the end, the bibliography. So this you have to do. Goes without saying. Okay, another often asked question, when do you use page numbers? When do you do EBIT citations? And when do you cite people? Now, basically, you are as precise as possible with the references. I mean, if you're not referencing it to a whole book, then you have to put the page number of the chapter that you're referencing to. For example, you could say, I mean, this is just a fictive example I've done here. Digital Media and Society is the best master program ever. And let's say that Cecilia, I, and Sylvain has written about this, where the whole book is about this. So then you refer to this, okay? And here you start with the year. So you can see here that Cecilia published her report on this 2013. So start with that, because both Sylvain and I did it 2014. And then Sylvain's last name, Fireblas, starts with an F. It comes before Svensson, S. So therefore he comes first in this sequence in here. Now, perhaps you want to we go into a more specific reasoning. Strand especially underlines the hardworking students for the program's reputations. Now, here is a specific reasoning in Strand's book that you're referring to. Then you have to put the page number and also put the reference always in connection to the name. So if you mention the author's name here, Cecilia Strand, then you have to put the references right in conjunction to that. And here you're very specific, so then you provide the page number. She further argues that in combination with great teachers, the program has reached new heights. Now you're going to refer to exactly the same person and book before, so then you can put EBIT, but it's a new page number, so then you just change the page number, but EBIT means as before. but only if it's in the previous sentence. And you can never start a new paragraph with an EBIT reference. And then, perhaps you want to cite here, me. Svensson also underlines the mix of nationalities and student groups. Now, how do you do here when you have a citation? Well, you have to put the reference in connection to the author, but the page number always have to be in connection to the citation. And if you don't mention the name here, Svensson, then you just put Svensson like this here. But if you both have a name and the author's name and a citation, you do it like this. Now, if you cite, you have to put the citation exactly as it is. So if I have made a spelling mistake, as I did here, then you just add this little note here, sick, which means it's not my mistake here, it's as it is written. So you say, you're citing precisely as it is. I realize that there is a mistake here, but since this is citation, I have to put a mistake here. Okay, so this gives you an idea about page numbers, IBID, and citations. Now, let's now go over to the group exercise. So I have uploaded on Studentportalen, well, I will upload on Studentportalen a text that I've been publishing in Proceeding. It's a short text, it's 2,000 words, it's only 4 pages. What kind of cultural citizenship? It was published in the Proceedings. Don't go to the Proceedings and sheet now, okay? But it was published there in the European Conference on E-Governance, ESEG 2013. So I've removed all the references in this text. So your job is to look at that and mark out of this lecture here where you would put a reference. And you will be provided with the proof when we meet the 18th. So this is one exercise, and you will discuss this in group, but do prepare for the groups when you do the discussions in class. And I will group you in class, so you won't have any groups before. So this will be done in class, depending on who will come, I don't know. The other group exercise that you will do is that I've also uploaded a text or an excerpt of a text that has been submitted to a volume that I edit. It's called Beyond Web 2.0 about youth participation in Kenya. Now, since I'm the editor of this volume that will come out next year, I had a lot of comments on this text, how it should be written and what it needs to be done. So I provided a lot of comments of this text. And I would also want you to read this text to think about what comments would you give to the author here. What do you think works and works not with this text? So in this way, when we discuss this in class the 18th of November, you will also get an idea how we think about judging quality of a text, what needs to be done, etc. So with this said, you have a lot of things to do. I thank you for listening, and I'll meet you the 17th, and we have this lecture the 18th where we do the group exercise, but I will have the introduction to the whole master thesis thesis project course, writing course in November 17th. We have this class November 18th, and I look forward to meet you. Take care.